3 drops of wolfsbane in a man's blood should have stopped his heart in 11 minutes. Yrsa Kolsdottir counted 47 before he finally screamed, and that was the moment she understood the King of Vartheim was not supposed to be alive at all. If you have ever pressed your palm against a wound and felt someone else's pulse fighting to stay yours, comment below where you're watching this from, because what happens next only makes sense if you already know what it costs to save someone the world has decided should die. The hut smelled of char and river mud. Rain came through a hole in the roof that Yrsa had patched 3 winters running, and that the wind always found again. She had dragged the stranger in from the flooded bank at moonrise, his weight nearly breaking her spine, his skin the color of old ash beneath a lattice of black veins spreading from a wound at his collarbone. Silver. She knew that poison the way she knew her own hands, the way the veins branched like frost on glass, the way the smell turned sweet and wrong, like fruit gone soft. Only one thing did that to a wolf's blood, and only one thing could pull it back out again before the heart forgot how to beat. She was not supposed to know that thing. That was the whole shape of her exile. 2 winters before, the healer's circle of the Ashfen pack had dragged her before the fire ring and named her cursed, Omega-born, scentless in a way that unsettled every alpha nose in the hall, able to read poison and rot and fever in a man's blood the way other healers read leaves. They called it a taint, an omen, a thing that should not exist in a body as low as hers. They stripped her of her healer's braid in front of the whole pack and put her on the road with a knife, a satchel of herbs, and the particular kind of silence reserved for people everyone has agreed to stop seeing. She built the hut with her own hands. She told herself, some nights, that she had stopped missing the fire ring. Most nights, she was lying. Now there was a half-dead stranger, bleeding black poison into her only blanket, and every instinct the pack had punished out of her was screaming the same word. Save him. She worked through the night without sleeping, grinding heartroot and river iron into a paste that stung her own fingers raw, forcing the mixture down his throat in doses too small to choke him and too large for caution. Twice his heart stopped at its rhythm entirely, and she brought it back with her palms flat against his chest, counting under her breath in the old Omega counting song her mother used to hum, the one no one in the pack had wanted to hear again after they named her cursed. By dawn, the black veins had receded to a thin gray line beneath his collarbone, and his eyes opened, gold going to amber, going to a green so dark it looked like the bottom of a winter lake, shifting with something that was not quite pain and not quite gratitude. "Who," he said, voice like gravel dragged over stone, "are you?" "Someone who doesn't know your name and would rather keep it that way," Yrsa said, and meant it. A stranger with silver in his blood was a stranger with enemies who used silver, and enemies who used silver on a wolf that size, with a chest that broad, with the kind of bearing that made her fold her spine straighter without meaning to. That was not a stranger she wanted to know. That was a stranger she wanted gone before whoever poisoned him came looking for the body. He did not give his name. He gave her nothing but a low, rough word of thanks, and a stare that followed her around the hut for 3 days, while his body knit itself back together, far faster than any human wound should, faster even than most wolves, which told her something she chose, for the moment, not to examine. She noticed the small things first, because small things were what her exile had trained her to notice. The way he never once complained, despite pain that would have broken lesser men into pieces. The way his eyes tracked the door every time the wind rattled it, calculating threat before his body had even finished healing enough to answer one. He slept in short, disciplined stretches, never more than 2 hours at a time, and woke each time with his hand already closed around the hilt of a knife she hadn't realized he still carried. A man built for war, she thought, watching him from across the fire on the second night, wrapped in her spare blanket, with 3 broken ribs still knitting under skin, gone the color of old bruises. A man someone had wanted dead badly enough to spend real silver doing it. He noticed her back, just as carefully. He noticed the calluses on her palms that came from years of grinding root and stripping bark, rather than any softer work. He noticed the way she flinched, almost imperceptibly, whenever wolves howled in the distance. A flinch that had nothing to do with fear of the sound, and everything to do with what that sound used to mean, before the fire ring, when a howl meant pack instead of warning. He never asked about it directly. He simply began, without comment, sitting slightly closer to the door than to her, angling his body between her and whatever might come through it, as though he had already decided, wound half-healed and name still withheld, that whatever had made her flinch like that would have to go through him first. He called himself Bjarke, nothing more. He ate her food without complaint, chopped her firewood without being asked, and watched her hands while she worked, the careful, exact way she measured herb against water, the way she never once flinched from the parts of the poison that had made every healer in Ashfen recoil. "You're not afraid of it," he said on the third night, watching her grind heartroot by firelight. "Most healers won't touch silver rot at all. They send for the pack alpha to finish it clean instead." "I'm not most healers." She did not look up. "I was told that particular fact rather permanently." "Told how?" "With a fire ring and 40 witnesses." She set down the pestle. "You ask a great many questions for a man who won't give his own name." Something moved behind his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or the specific discomfort of a man unused to being pressed. Bjarke will do, for now. It would not do. She would learn, for very much longer. On the 5th night, 3 riders came through the tree line, with torches and the black and bone banner of a pack she didn't recognize, and Bjarke went still, in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with calculation. He pulled her behind the woodpile with a hand that dwarfed her wrist entirely, and for one long, held breath, Yrsa felt something she had not let herself feel in 2 winters, the strange, dangerous safety of being shielded by someone who meant it. "Ashfen colors," he murmured, reading the second banner behind the rider's shoulders. The pack that had exiled her, patrolling territory 2 days from where they had any business patrolling. "They're not looking for me." "No," Yrsa said slowly, watching the lead rider's face in the torchlight, a face she recognized with a cold drop in her stomach. Freydis, her cousin, once, before blood stopped meaning anything to that family. "They're looking for me." "Why?" "Because dead Omegas don't come back to make anyone remember what they did." CTA line. If you've ever had to make yourself small so someone else's cruelty could feel justified, drop a comment with the word small, because Gersa's about to stop doing that, and it happens faster than you think. The riders passed without stopping, torchlight swallowed by rain and distance, and Bjarke did not let go of her wrist until the sound of hooves had been gone a full count of 200. When he finally released her, his thumb dragged once, absently, over the pulse point at her wrist, and something in his expression sharpened into a decision he did not share with her. "Tell me about the fire ring," he said. She hadn't meant to. She told him anyway. The healer's braid cut in front of the hall. The word "cursed," said by a council that had used her gift for 6 years before deciding it frightened them more than it served them. The particular flavor of humiliation in being unmade in front of people who had once called her sister. Freydis's voice, sweetest of all of them, delivering the sentence, "An Omega who reads poison in a man's blood is an Omega who could put it there herself. We are not fools enough to keep a knife that sharp so close to our throats." Bjarke's jaw had gone tight enough to ache by the time she finished. They wasted 6 years of loyalty on a suspicion they invented to justify their own fear, he said. That is not justice. That is cowardice, wearing a council's robes. You say that like you'd know the difference. I would, he said, because I preside over judgments like it every season, and I have learned to smell the difference between real treachery and a room that has decided to be afraid of something it doesn't understand. It was the first true thing he had told her about himself, and she filed it away without knowing yet how heavy it would turn out to be. By the second week, his strength had returned entirely. She watched him split logs that would have taken 2 grown men, watched the muscle move under skin, no longer marked by black veins, watched him fight 2 wolves that came skulking too close to the hut with a speed and brutal precision that told her exactly what kind of wolf she had been sheltering, even if he still hadn't told her a title to go with it. He fought like something built for war rather than survival. He fought like a man who had never once had to wonder whether he would win. He also watched her, the way starving men watch bread, carefully, at first, as though testing whether she'd notice, and then less carefully, When it became clear she noticed everything, and simply chose, for reasons of her own, not to comment. "You keep looking at me like you're deciding something," she said one evening, stitching a tear in his borrowed shirt by firelight. "I am. Deciding what? Whether the woman who pulled silver rod out of my blood with her bare hands, and a song her exiled mother taught her, understands yet what she actually is." His voice had dropped low, rough at the edges. "Because I don't think she does." "Enlighten me then." "You're the rarest kind of healer left in 6 kingdoms," he said, "and every pack that exiled someone like you did it because they were too small to hold what you're capable of. Not because you were a danger, because you were proof of how little they understood." She should have laughed it off. Instead, her hands stilled over the stitching, and the silence that followed had weight to it, the particular weight of 2 people standing very close to a door neither had opened yet. CTA line: if you've ever wanted someone to look at your worst scar and call it a gift instead of a flaw, stay to the end, because this is the exact moment Yrsa stops believing the fire ring was ever right about her. It was the messenger who broke it, a boy no older than 12, half frozen, stumbling out of the tree line 3 nights later, with a wax-sealed letter clutched against his chest, and Bjarke's personal crest pressed into the wax, a crest Yrsa had never seen, but recognized immediately as belonging to no ordinary wolf. Bjarke's face, reading it, went through 3 expressions in the space of a breath: relief, fury, and something colder underneath both. "Steinar," he said, and the name came out like a curse. "Who?" "My father's second, and mine after him. The man I trusted to hold Vartame steady while I rode the border alone." Bjarke's hand crushed the letter without meaning to. "He tells the court I died of fever in the eastern camp. He tells them a body was burned. He has already called the succession council for the new moon." "You're the king," Yrsa said slowly, the pieces she had been refusing to assemble finally locking into place, the bearing, the authority in his voice. The wolves who came to test him and lost so completely they didn't come back. The king of Vartheim. "I was poisoned 3 weeks ago by a man wearing my own colors, left for the river to finish what the silver couldn't," Bjarke said. "And the man who ordered it is currently telling my entire kingdom that I'm dead, so he can stand in front of the council in 9 days and take my crown in the name of mourning me properly." The wind found the hole in the roof again, and neither of them moved to notice it. "Then we have 9 days, Yrsa said, to prove a dead king is standing in your own hut." He looked at her, the way a man looks at solid ground after a long time drowning. "We," he repeated. "You didn't think I dragged you out of a river and spent 5 nights keeping your heart beating just to hand you back to the man who tried to stop it, did you?" Something in his face broke open. Not weakness, but the particular relief of a man who has spent his whole life being useful to everyone and has just been offered help without a single condition attached. "Steinar will have men watching every road into Vartheim," he said, "and if Ashfen riders are already this far south hunting you, we'll be walking into 2 hunts at once, not 1. Then we'd better be very good at not being caught." They left the hut before dawn. The 9 days that followed cut themselves into Yrsa's memory, in fragments sharp enough to draw blood if she pressed on them later. Sleeping in a hollowed log, with Bjarke's arm, a wall of heat at her back, while frost silvered the bark above their heads. A night raid by Steinar's scouts that Bjarke fought off with his bare hands while shouting at her to run, and her answering, for the first time in 2 winters, by staying exactly where she was and putting 3 arrows into throats instead. The way he looked at her afterward, not with the condescending relief of a man checking that a fragile thing had survived, but with something closer to awe, like he was recalculating, in real time, everything he'd assumed a healer's hands were for. "You could have run," he said, breathing hard, blood, not his, cooling on his knuckles. "I don't run from men who think a knife makes them dangerous," Yrsa said. "I've buried better men than that, with worse wounds than I gave them." He laughed, a short, startled sound, like it had been dragged out of him against his will. "Ashfen was a fool to let you go. Ashfen was a fool for a great many things. Losing me is barely on the list." They kept moving through country that grew colder and stranger the closer it drew them to Vartheim's border. Pine forests, so dense The sky disappeared for hours at a stretch. Ravines crossed on fallen trunks, slick with frost. A river ford, where the current ran fast enough to take a grown wolf off its feet, if it wasn't crossed exactly right. Bjarke carried her across that ford on his back without asking permission, water crashing to his chest, and did not set her down again once they reached the far bank, until she pointed out, dryly, that she still had 2 working legs of her own. He set her down slowly, reluctantly, his hands lingering at her waist a beat longer than the crossing required, and neither of them commented on it, though the air between them had gone thick enough to taste. At night, when the cold cut too deep for separate bedrolls, they shared warmth without discussing it as anything more than practicality, her back against his chest, his arm a solid, careful weight across her ribs, his breath slow and even against the crown of her head. She catalogued, in the dark, every place her exile had taught her to expect cruelty, and found none of it in him. No grip too tight, no silence used as punishment, no casual reminder of whose comfort mattered more. He asked, every single night, whether the position was comfortable for her before he let himself relax into it, and every single night, she found that small, repeated question doing more to unmake 2 winters of careful self-protection than anything else he could have said aloud. By the 6th night, camped in the lee of a burned-out shepherd's tower, he told her the rest of it without her asking, how Steinar had served his father for 30 years and him for 6, how the poisoning bore Steinar's particular cruelty, the silver cut precisely deep enough to weaken, not kill outright, so the river could finish the work and leave no wound anyone could trace back to a blade. How the only reason Bjarke had survived at all was a healer 2 winters exiled for a gift her own pack had been too afraid to understand. He miscalculated one thing, Bjarke said, low, watching the fire instead of her, which was somehow more intimate than if he'd looked at her directly. He didn't account for you existing at all. Careful, Yrsa said, throat tighter than she meant to let it be. You're starting to sound like a man who's decided something. I decided it, the first night you counted my heartbeat back into rhythm with your mother's song. He turned to look at her then, gold-green eyes gone dark and steady in the firelight. I have been trying, very badly, to be patient about telling you so. CTA line. If you know exactly what it feels like to wait for someone to catch up to what you already knew, comment waiting, because this is the part where he finally stops waiting. What happened between them after that was not loud. It was the particular quiet of 2 people who had both spent years being underestimated by everyone meant to protect them, finally being seen without flinching, his mouth finding hers slow and certain by firelight, her hands finally, deliberately, not stitching or grinding or measuring anything at all, just resting flat against a chest whose heartbeat she had once had to fight to save, and now simply got to feel, steady and whole, and hers to listen to. He said her name like it was something he intended to keep saying for the rest of his life. She let him. They reached the outskirts of Vartheim on the 8th night, and it was there, the second hunt caught up with them. Freydis, 12 riders behind her, blocking the north road with the flat, satisfied smile of a woman who has been waiting 2 winters to finish what the fire ring started. Well, Freydis said, looking Yrsa over like something scraped off a boot, the little cursed Omega, keeping company with dead men now. Fitting. He's not dead, Yrsa said. You should look more closely before you insult a king. Freydis's laugh was sharp and short, and it died completely when Bjarke stepped out of the tree line behind Yrsa, no longer bothering to hide the bearing that marked him as exactly what he was, and every rider behind Freydis dropped to one knee before she'd finished processing what she was seeing. You, Freydis said, color draining, you're supposed to be dead. Yes, I understand the confusion. Bjarke's voice had dropped into something low and final. Your pack has been running Ashven colors, 2 days deep into contested border territory, hunting a healer who saved my life with a gift your council decided to punish instead of understand. That is a mistake I intend to have your council explain to my face in 9 days' time, at my coronation trial, where the woman you exiled will be standing beside me as the reason I'm alive to attend it at all. Freydis's mouth opened and produced nothing at all. Kneel, Bjarke said, or ride home and explain to your council why you didn't. She rode home. The formal council chamber of Vartheim, was carved from black stone older than the kingdom's first king, ringed by 30 seats for the pack elders and a raised dais at its center, where accusations were weighed and judgments were finalized in front of the whole gathered court. Steinar stood on that dais when Bjarke walked in 9 days after his supposed death, mid-sentence in a eulogy so practiced it took him a full 3 seconds to register that the man he was memorializing had just walked through the door alive, unmarked, silver-wrought nowhere in his blood, with an exiled Omega healer at his side, whose steady hand had never once left the small of his back. The silence in the chamber had a texture Yrsa would remember for the rest of her life. 30 elders frozen mid-breath, torchlight guttering against black stone, the eulogy's last word still hanging unfinished in Steinar's open mouth. Somewhere behind her, a councilwoman's goblet slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers and shattered against the floor, and even that sound seemed to arrive from very far away, swallowed by a hush too total to belong to a room full of living people. Yrsa felt every eye in the chamber move from Bjarke to her and back again, cataloging the healer's satchel still slung across her shoulder, the road dust on her boots, the unmistakable, proprietary way the king's hand had not once left the small of her back since they'd crossed the threshold. She held her spine the way her mother had taught her to hold it, before a fire ring that no longer had any power over her at all, and did not look away from a single one of them. "You look pale, Steinar," Bjarke said into it. "Grief does that, I hear, though I'd have thought 30 years of loyalty would have taught you to grieve less convincingly than this." What followed was not fast. Bjarke laid it out in front of the full council, with the same precision Yrsa had watched him use to split a log clean down its center. The silver blade traced back to the royal armory's private stock, accessible to exactly 4 men, 3 of whom had verified alibis. The physician's report Steinar had commissioned prematurely, dated 2 days before Bjarke's supposed death. The guard, finally, dragged forward pale and shaking, who broke and confessed under the council's questioning that Steinar had paid him to leave the Eastern Camp's watch, unmanned, the exact night the poison was administered. Freydis's earlier accusation against Yrsa came apart in the same breath, laid bare for the coward's cover it had always been. Not a genuine fear of a dangerous gift, but a council too small and too frightened to admit that the Omega they'd exiled had simply been better at her work than any of them, and that being reminded of that daily had been unbearable in a way none of them had the honesty to name. An Omega who reads poison in a man's blood is an Omega who could put it there herself, Bjarke said, quoting Freydis's own sentence back to the chamber with a precision that made her flinch. That is what your council said when it stripped a woman of 6 years of loyal service. I would like the record to reflect what actually happened instead. That same Omega spent 5 nights, unpaid and unthanked, pulling silver wrought out of a stranger's blood, with nothing but heartroot, river iron, and a song her own exiled mother taught her. And that stranger turned out to be the king you'd already decided to mourn. Ashfen's council did not exile a curse. It exiled the reason I am standing in front of you today. The council's verdict, when it came fast and unanimous. Steinar was stripped of every title he had held for 30 years and led out in chains through a chamber gone utterly silent, his face a gray, collapsed thing that bore no resemblance to the confident man who had opened the session, eulogizing a king he'd tried to murder. Freydis, present as a witness by then and named formally for her role in a 2-winter campaign of exile enforcement that had crossed clean into persecution, was stripped of her council seat on the spot. The black and bone banner she'd ridden under, confiscated before she'd even finished absorbing the shape of her own ruin. The coward who had leaked the Eastern Camp's watch schedule for coin was given the mercy of exile rather than execution, which the chambers seemed to agree was mercy he had done nothing to earn. Bjarke turned from the dais to the gathered court and did the one thing Yrsa had not let herself imagine, even in the quietest hours of the 9 days it had taken to get there. He took her hand in front of 30 elders and the full weight of a kingdom's attention and named her, not healer, not exile, not the Omega everyone had once agreed to stop seeing, but queen claimed of Vartheim, in the old tongue, in front of witnesses who would carry the words back to every pack within a season's ride, including one particular fire ring 2 winters gone that had once decided her gift was a curse worth punishing. "Let it be known," Bjark said, voice carrying to the chamber's furthest stone, "that Varthame does not punish gifts, it fails to understand. It kneels to them." 30 elders knelt. Yrsa, who had spent 2 winters teaching herself not to expect a single room to ever do that for her again, did not cry in front of the council. She saved that, privately, for later. For the quiet of a chamber with no witnesses at all, Bjarke's hand steady against the back of her neck, her own heartbeat finally, after 2 long winters, sounding like something worth protecting rather than something to hide. Steinar spent the remainder of his life in the deepest cell beneath Vartheim's Blackstone Keep, stripped of rank, stripped of name, fed just enough to remember exactly what he'd lost. Freydis rode out of Vartheim's borders within the week, her family's name quietly struck from 3 generations of Ashven record, her own council seat handed to a cousin who had spent years privately disagreeing with the exile and had simply never been brave enough to say so until it no longer cost her anything. The coward who sold out the watch schedule for coin lived out his exile somewhere no one troubled to ask after. Ashven's remaining council sent an envoy within the month, careful, apologetic, offering reinstatement of Yrsa's healer's braid, as though 6 years of stolen service and 2 winters of exile could be undone with a piece of ribbon and a formal letter. Shar read the letter once, by firelight, in the private chamber that was now unmistakably hers, and set it directly into the flames without a single word of reply. Some doors, she had decided, were better left burned than reopened. Vartheim, by contrast, gave her a healer's hall of her own by the new moon, built to her exact specification, stocked with every herb she had once had to forage for alone in the cold, staffed by apprentices who came to her not out of pity or suspicion, but because the king himself had made it known, in front of his entire court, precisely what kind of healer had saved his life, and precisely how he expected her gift to be honored going forward. She trained the first of them within the season. She never once had to defend the shape of her own hands again. What is a curse, really, but a gift standing in a room too small and too frightened to hold it properly? Yrsa Kolsdottir had spent 2 winters believing the Fire Ring's verdict was the truest thing anyone had ever said about her. It took a poisoned king, a river at midnight, and a song her exiled mother taught her to prove that the room had simply been wrong, and that the right room, once she found it, would kneel. 9 months later, on the anniversary of the night she'd pulled him out of the river, Bjarke pressed something small and cold into her palm by firelight, his mother's betrothal cuff, silver worked through with iron, so it could never again be turned into a weapon against the wolf who wore it. A detail Yrsa understood immediately was not an accident. She said yes before he'd finished asking. The betrothal feast that followed lasted 3 days and emptied Vartheim's cellars twice over, and somewhere in the middle of it, Freydis's old council seat, now held by the cousin who'd finally found her spine, sent formal congratulations that Yrsa read once, smiled at, and filed away without needing to burn. But that is a story for another night, because what happened at that betrothal feast, when an Ashven rider arrived uninvited with a proposal no one in that hall expected, is where the next one picks up. Follow to see exactly what he offered, and exactly what it cost him to ask.